Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, December 6th, and Larry Johnson is back with us. Welcome back, Larry.
I am so pleased to be with you, Nima.
Let's get started, Larry, with the latest video of Erdogan talking about the conflict in Syria. I want to play it out for you and see what's your take.
Sure.
Basically reiterating some of the points he's been making in recent days about the fact that Bashar al-Assad has refused to sort of get into any kind of talks with Turkey or even to sort of try to reconcile with opposition groups or the people in general in Syria, and basically implying that Bashar al-Assad has brought all this on himself. Interesting that he's pointing out there's something that's probably not lost on many people, that this rebel operation led by Hayat al-Tahrir al-Sham, already taken Aleppo, well established in Hama now, seems like it could be heading for Homs, and then after that there's only pretty much Damascus, the capital city, remains. So if they take, well, they've already taken Aleppo, Hama, and then they take Homs as well. That's the second, third and fourth biggest cities in the country, just leaving the capital. Also interesting that he mentions potentially something going on with the Prime Minister of Lebanon. It's not exactly clear what he was talking about, but maybe the fact that Lebanon needs even more help because of all this extra increased fighting in Syria. Lebanon borders Syria, and there may be more people heading into that country to escape from the fighting. And it's maybe the fact that more aid is needed in that country. That seems to be what he's suggesting, but not exactly clear. Obviously, Lebanon already in quite a desperate situation because there's been all this fighting for the last few months with Israel and Hezbollah there. So a very desperate, very difficult situation for Lebanon at the moment, it seems, and the Turkish government there sort of pledging to do what it can to help.
Larry, right now, as you see, Erdogan is putting himself and his priorities above all of other nations, other people in that region. We have two countries, Iran and Russia. I do believe that they feel betrayed by Turkey. How do you find the situation right now?
Well, let's start with your opening statement that Erdogan is now putting himself above all the others. Dude, you've been paying attention over the last decade? Probably not, because you were doing other things like studying, getting a degree. He's always done that. This is like being surprised that a dog barks at strangers. So Erdogan's not doing something new and unique. Erdogan's being Erdogan, which it means what? He has his own agenda. He is duplicitous. He will betray you in a heartbeat. He's a big talker, but this, he's had long-standing conflicts with Syria that go back to the days of Bashar al-Assad's dad, Hafez al-Assad, and probably before that. There's always been this tension with the Kurdish, the PKK, and the Kurdish Workers' Party in terms of carrying out terrorist attacks in Turkey. The Kurds always described it as the national liberation movement, but Turkey saw it as terrorism. And, frankly, Greece was also involved with it. So what catches my attention about this latest uptick in the violence, is that this was coordinated with the West. And so this is and in fact, a lot of the dire news that's coming out, say, oh, this is falling and this is falling. Let's recognize there's a lot of propaganda being put out there. I'm not sure exactly how bad the situation is in Syria right now, but I would caution people to please take it with most of what's on social media with a big grain of salt. And, the images that are being portrayed of all these happy people, and just, you and I were talking before we came on air, the interview that CNN did with this guy. Now think about this. They had a CNN female doing the interview with this guy. Now, this guy is not one of the leading advocates for women's rights in the world. Let's be clear about that. So this is entirely stage managed. There were, I guarantee you, either CIA or British intelligence officers that helped arrange that. Maybe they arranged it through the Turks. But this was a CIA, this was an intelligence operation to put a human face on Mr. What's his name? Jelani. I haven't taken time to commit that to memory yet. But this Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is a descendant of Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda is not actually as bad as what ISIS was. What ISIS became with Abu Musad al-Zarqawi, created it, founded it, 2003. It was something different than what we call the traditional terrorist groups. Hezbollah and Hamas were always quote identified as terrorist groups, but the reality was Hezbollah and Hamas, they were fighting not to establish a global caliphate, not to go out and segregate people according to their religion. They were fighting for their land. They happened to hold a religious outlook and theology behind their quest for that kind of freedom. But what ISIS emerged with was something very different. And anybody that's ever been around a religious fanatic, we see it within the Jewish community of these people like Itamar Ben Gavir and Bezalel Smotrich. They're, let's call them, they'd be like the ISIS of Jews. And they are uncompromising. It comes with the mentality, I'm in touch with God. I am speaking the words of God. And if you don't accept it, you should die. It is not just that ISIS was attacking, they were a Sunni movement, grounded in Sunni theology, and therefore viewed the Shia as apostates. And the Shia had one choice: either repent, convert, or die. And I posted the other day on Sonar 21 a couple of letters. First, the letter written by Abu Musab al-Zarqawi that detailed why he was his particular view of how the world should be. And then that was followed up with a letter that was sent to him by Ayman al-Zawahiri, the number 2 guy in Al-Qaeda. And it turned out that bin Laden and Zawahiri were a little bothered by Zarqawi going around killing Shia Muslims and attacking mosques in Iraq because they were not Muslim enough. And, needless to say, the Christians, Jews, they were, if confronted, their choice was convert or be beheaded. So that's sort of the mentality of ISIS. Well, ISIS begat al-Nusra. And al-Nusra begat Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. I'm shortening it, but there were lots of internal division because whenever you get these religious crazies together, and I've experienced it on the Christian side of the house, that you get one group that's so convinced that they're right and that they've got the truth and that everybody else is in apostasy and presenting heresy, that they have the right to force their way. It's sort of a crazy mindset. Well, that's where this guy is coming from, and the really bizarre, ironic twist to it is that the United States, who back in 2001 said, we're fighting a global war on terror against Al-Qaeda, and to stop this the spread of this Islamic global caliphate. Well, now we're supporting and providing aid, intelligence. Maybe it's probably not direct, but I guarantee it's certainly indirect. The simple fact that Ukrainian military officers are there training these guys, working with them, helping them with drones. That wasn't Ukraine on its own going, yeah, man, the war's going so well here in Ukraine, dude. We got some excess. We can go upset. They're getting their ass kicked by the Russians, and yet they've got time to go off to Syria to do training. And, there's got a shortage of manpower in Ukraine, but yet they take this incredibly valuable resource of trained military personnel and send them there. Why? Because this is part of a broader plan. This isn't about just getting rid of Bashar al-Assad and Erdogan can claim that this is all about, he's miffed at the lack of cooperation or negotiation with Bashar al-Assad. This is much bigger. This is to go after Syria in order to go after Iran and ultimately hoping to weaken and distract Russia. Now, I think that, and so to that end, there is a major propaganda flood right now about Syria. It's hopeless. It's going to die. Well, maybe it is. I really haven't devoted myself to trying to ferret out what's really going on the ground. But what I'm seeing, and in fact, the other day when they had at the United Nations, the United States brought in the white helmets to testify. Well, that was your immediate clue that this was an intelligence operation. The white helmets are, I call a British front group. The British intelligence set them up, then used them extensively. They were the ones who kept reporting, there's been a chemical weapons attack in Syria back in 2013. It was done by al-Nusra. It was not done by the Syrian government, but the attempt was to blame the Syrians. It was a clear false flag in order to bring in the West. So, ultimately this is about trying to help Israel, and Israel at the time when Israel itself is in desperate straits. So, how's that for a long-winded answer to your question about Erdogan?
Larry, here is the guy that CNN interviewed. He was part of ISIS, Al-Ghalani, his name is. And before that, we had this article in the Telegraph. You look at the title of this article and how these guys are, as you mentioned, they're trying to picture these people the way that it's not possible. You cannot put them diversity friendly and jihadist. How you can put these words together?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, hi, my name's Al-Jalani. My pronouns are behead and bomb. God, please, it is ridiculous. I am, if the fact, and there's a video that surfaced of these guys beheading, it looked like a 13-year-old boy. Okay, think about that. And that became sort of their hallmark of chopping the heads off of people. But the fact that it's on the Telegraph, this tells you this is part of a broader intelligence community information operation to try to clean up their image, humanize them. I wouldn't be surprised if they'll show them sitting by a fire, petting a dog, smoking a cigar or something, wearing a big old sweater. Meanwhile, in the back room, someone's getting raped or beheaded. These are religious fanatics. I am firmly opposed to religious fanatics, whether it's Muslim, Jewish, or Christian. these fanatics they're up to no good. They're intolerant, and in their certainty of their righteousness, that they are the ultimate holy warrior, they end up committing everything that's unholy.
Larry, if you remember, during that Prigozhin mutiny in Russia, we had some sort of confusion within those people who were supporting Russia.
Yeah.
These Telegram channels, all those people who were supporting Russia in their goals in
Excuse
Ukraine,
me.
they were some sort of division. Many people were on the side of Prigozhin, helping. No, they're not doing enough. We have to. He has every right to do that. And if you remember that they were talking about that Prigozhin is just capturing city by city and going toward Moscow.
Yeah.
The same thing right now is happening right now. Those channels who were supporting the resistance in the situation in Gaza, it seems that they're shifting toward these people. As you mentioned, they are ISIS. They've changed their name, but we know what's the nature of these people is.
Yeah.
What is the nature of these people? But here is the situation. Do you think that how long does it take for these people to understand? Because with the case of Prigozhin, we knew from the beginning that he's not gonna get any sort of success in his way, that he was trying to capture Moscow. I don't know. He was against Shoigu and all of those people. And right now it seems it would be the same.
Well, that again was just another intelligence operation on the part of the West, a failed one. That they had been, they're sort of, I guess, double crossed by Prigozhin, whether that was part of a Russian plan or that simply, in terms of that Prigozhin was witting of the plan, or that Prigozhin was used by Russian intelligence as bait, and he walked into a trap, and he ultimately paid the price for it. But whenever you start seeing this kind of propaganda that's being put out, and I've been, a couple of Telegram channels, I've been sort of surprised by both how they've done a 180 degree on some of their reporting, as well as being used to push a particular line. So it's one of, oh my God, they're gonna fail, and they're let's see what Russia and Iran do. Russia's not acting in a panic manner, nor is Iran. And this is what I find so fascinating. You keep hearing from the West about Iran being the number one sponsor of terrorism. And so I went back specifically last night over the last 10 years. Actually 12 years, going back to 2012, looking at the Bureau of Counterterrorism annual report on country reports on terrorism. Guess who the number one terrorist groups have been over the last 10 years? ISIS and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Not a single mention in the top 10 groups, the most active terrorist groups, of Hezbollah or Hamas. And the reason for that's simple. They have not been engaged with a lot of terrorist attacks. They have been carrying out some insurgency activities, but, they are, the particular Hezbollah has tended to focus more on military targets. They're not out routinely attacking and killing civilians at all. Al-Sham, the HTS, on the other hand, has been. And yet the West, when you've got the objective evidence that these are the terrorist groups, who is the West backing? The terrorist groups. And I think, the last time I was on, I talked about the whole role of going back to Benghazi, when that was and that CIA base was stood up, and his mission was to collect weapons and process those weapons and move them. They were moved on a particular ship, cargo ship, and sent to Turkey, unloaded there, and then processed. And in some of these intelligence operations, if you want to maintain plausible deniability, you use a cutout. So they were using the Turks, and the Turks were involved. They had their own reason. I'm not suggesting that they were mere puppets of the West. Heavens no, the Turks are pursuing their own agenda there as well. But there are times we come together and find at least areas of common agreement. But we shouldn't kid ourselves that these groups like Al-Sham, HTS, like al-Nusra, like ISIS, they're not your traditional. When you go back and look at terrorist groups, even the Jewish terrorist groups like Erdogan was one of the major ones in Israel before it became Israel. It was all about attacking a particular authority or institution or government that in order to secure land and independence of that particular area. What these radical Sunni Islamists, the Salafists are, they have more of a, let's call it a Muslim Trotskyite vision for the world. They want to remake the world, bring the world around to their point of view that is the only one that can be tolerated or allowed. And it's this concept of a global caliphate. Well, many would dismiss that as, that's silly. No, they really believe it. They believe that that's what they're involved with. And so, I ran into this with a offshoot of the Mormon Church, and I had a personal relationship by virtue of when I was 11 years old, 12 years old. The guy that was our basketball coach, he was like 19 or 20. A guy named Jeffrey Lundgren. Well, some years later, he decided he was a prophet of God. And he assembled a group of people around him because he claimed that he had these revelations. Man, one of his revelations was he got to have sex with all the women. Okay, hey, that's my kind of God, But he ended up with this one family, and I actually knew this family. It was a husband and wife and 3 little girls. They joined this sect. And one day, Jeffrey Lundgren declared that they were apostates and had the other members of his group kill them. They murdered these 3 little girls and this husband and wife. Well, ultimately the police found out, Lundgren went away to prison, died in prison. But that kind of mentality is exactly what you're seeing here with HTS. And frankly, that's what you're seeing among these Israeli settlers, many of them. That same kind of extremist view that is born out of a theological conviction that you have the unique truth, that your truth is the only truth, and that there is no truth but your truth.
Larry, do you think Iran, Russia, and Turkey the foreign ministers of these countries gonna meet in Doha? What are they gonna talk about, in your opinion, with what we've seen so far from Turkey? Because Turkey, it doesn't seem because in 2016, when they have decided to go after some sort of settlement, some sort of political settlement between the parties, they have been in a dire situation. If you remember, Iran, Russia, and Syrians were just killing each and every Turks and these jihadis in that region. They had the upper hand in those days. That's why they've come to this in 2020. They've reached this agreement. And right now, with this, I would call it betrayal on the part of Turkey against Iran and Russia. what would be the nature of these sort of talks, and how they can convince Turkey what they're doing right now would not be for the benefit of all of Muslim nations or the stability of the region?
Well, I start from the premise that each of these countries they have their own interests. So you've got to identify, okay, what are those interests? What are they trying to accomplish? Turkey right now does have some leverage. So, it controls access to the Black Sea. And Russia doesn't want to get into a war with Turkey right now because it's already at war with the rest of NATO. And Turkey so far has wavered as far as getting involved with that war in Ukraine. So from Russia's standpoint, it's best to keep Turkey on the sidelines of that. And I think when you come to Turkey and Iran, they both share a common view that, the Kurds are a problem. And they don't want the Kurds, claiming territory, setting up an independent state, and or creating any kind of threat for either. So what I'm saying is that they can find some areas of common agreement. The thing I don't have full insight into right now, the timing of this uprising. This was planned. This didn't just happen. This wasn't a spontaneous, hey kids, let's put on a show. No, the supplies were built up, the training was done, even in planning at a fairly sophisticated level. Was this an intelligence failure on the part of, say, Russia and or Iran, not to mention Syria? I'd say definitely on that, certainly. But Turkey it's got, let's call it, a temporary opening to try to exploit. But in the next 2 to 3 months, probably, we're going to see the full collapse of the war effort in Ukraine. And particularly with Trump in, Turkey's going to realize that, NATO's no longer playing a winning hand. And in fact, once it becomes apparent that NATO is clearly weakened, I think you'll see Turkey become more assertive and distancing itself from NATO. I'm pretty sure that at least both the Russians, let me rephrase this, Western analysts looking at the situation in Syria have a tendency to look at everything in the immediate, short term, got to deal with this crisis now, because our policy is a whack-a-mole policy. Are you familiar with whack-a-mole? If you go to like a carnival, or it's this game, you got a board, and a head will pop up out of the board, and you have to hit it. And so, the mole, so you're always constantly reacting. You're not, there's no strategy, there's no planning. It's just, something, you hit it. That's how the West approaches issues like what's going on in Syria right now. It's a whack-a-mole. Russia and Iran, they're more like, they're chess players. I guess chess was started in India, but really took hold in Iran, and then the Russians picked it up, and so. But it's a game of thinking 3, 4, 5 moves ahead. You're not just worried about what's in front of me, what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen next week, how about next month, how about next year, and you're planning ahead. So I think that's why they're going to Doha to talk about that. We have this immediate crisis, but let's think this through in terms of where do we want to be 2 years from now. And that's why you've seen some interesting mixed signals that Erdogan takes credit, and then The foreign minister Fadan says, "Oh no, we didn't do this. We're not involved." But the clearest tell that this is I'll call it a coordinated intelligence operation is the fact that you got the presence of Ukrainian officers there, because Ukrainian officers in Turkey or in Syria working with HTS they wouldn't be there without the support and assistance of the CIA and MI6.
In your opinion, can Iran afford losing Syria? And
Well, I'm not sure that it is. They can afford losing parts of Syria.
part of Syria, no, I'm talking about if they would be successful in overthrowing Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Is that the case right now in Iran? Let's assume Iranians are thinking of what's going on in Syria. What's the importance of Syria for Iran?
It doesn't really create a disastrous situation for Iran, but it does create a real disastrous situation potentially for Hezbollah, because how's Hezbollah going to be funded and supplied? Because right now, Syria has been a major player in that regard, that the supplies do transit Syrian territory. So, that's why we've got to step back and look at this in a much broader context. Is Israel, has Israel really secured a victory over Hezbollah? I don't think so. Nor has it secured one over Hamas. A lot is up in the air because nobody really is certain what Donald Trump is going to do. And these are last-ditch desperation measures by the Biden administration in terms of creating, helping really foment more chaos in the region. So it's, I think Iran's looking at it with some concern, and that's why, the foreign minister is engaged. If you look at the messaging that's dominating Telegram, then you would quickly conclude that Bashar al-Assad will be out of office. He's going to be gone. Yeah. I don't know if you recall back in 2013 when the offensives were up and running then, there were predictions every day, here in the United States on Fox News. Well, Bashar al-Assad, he's only got like 24 hours left. Well, it turned out not to be true. So this is, I may be naive and not being able to actually fully grasp what's happening on the ground, but I suspect it's not nearly as dire as the social media is presenting it. But the information operation is definitely there to try to help prepare the public for that kind of outcome. But I think, Russia has some important assets. I understand that, like in Aleppo, they've got some radar stations. And I don't see the Russians necessarily getting run out of town by these guys.
Larry, beside this conflict in the West Asia, we had a new color. It's not a new, but we had some sort of conflict in Georgia. Is that a coincidence? All of these conflicts popping up at the same moment in Georgia, in Syria, and at the same time, Jake Sullivan, Blinken talking about sending 50, if I'm not mistaken, $1 billion from Russian frozen assets to Ukraine. Is that all orchestrated by Washington?
Of course. This is the, well, actually, let's step back and if you look at Ukraine, Georgia, and Syria, and Israel, Palestine, if you're looking at them as separate, distinct events, activities, you're looking at it wrong. You know, you got to step back and realize there is, if you want to call it a strategy, yeah, there is a strategy on the part of the West right now of trying to set the building on fire, create as many different fires and distractions as possible. What I find really interesting, let's first go with Ukraine, that since the Russians launched the Oreshnik missile and hit that plant, the Yuzmash plant in Dnipropetrovsk, Pokrovsk, the Ukrainians haven't been too active, have they, in launching ATACMS, Storm Shadows, and Scalps? And so sometime, I guess, 2 or 3 days after that attack, reportedly, General Gerasimov made a phone call to General Charlie Brown, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and they had a conversation. Now, we're not really sure what that conversation was, but all I can tell you is they had that conversation, and then since then, we've not, Ukraine has been launching drone attacks, trying to get drones inside Russia, and Russia's shooting every one of them down. But no more of these long-range, middle-range, they call them long-range missiles, but really they're short-range to medium-range missiles. They haven't been launching those. Why? Because they've recognized that they have come up against a red line with Russia. Well, Georgia's different. They have the playbook that was unleashed back in the Maidan in 2014 in Kiev. They have it there. They're bringing in people from the outside. You've got these foreign funded non-governmental offices that are funneling money and organizing people to go to the streets and protest. They are definitely trying to create provocations so that there will be some extreme reaction by the Georgian forces. And yet what's sort of interesting is the Georgian government is letting these people protest. Yeah, and even up to and include they're shooting fireworks and they're shining lasers into the eyes of the police. And, several have been injured. But unlike what happened in Ukraine, where the president at the time folded and went running off to Russia looking for protection, the current Georgian prime minister is standing very strong and just say, no, we're not going to be overcome by these outsiders. But again, it was one other effort by the West. They're losing in Ukraine, so they've got to figure out where else can we win? Where can we try to divert Russian resources? Because recognize the West still believes, even though it sounds crazy, they believe that Russia is weak militarily, that Russia has limited military resources, and that if they can only create a crisis here, 2 or 3 crises in other places, and force Russia to divert military assets, that will weaken Russia's offensive operations in Ukraine and help the Ukrainians recover. So that's, I think that's their strategy in a nutshell. That's what they're trying to do. So that's why what you're seeing take place in Syria, take place in Georgia is happening. It's all part of a, sort of a last-ditch effort. You go, we got to do something to stop the Russians. What can we do? Let's set these other places on fire. Let's see if we can divert them. And they don't understand that, Russia's army is at 1.5 million, last number I saw. And their production of advanced fighter aircraft and other kinds of fixed-wing combat aircraft has dramatically accelerated over the last 2 years. And in terms of both having trained pilots that are capable of flying those. So actually, Russia's in a position where it can deploy forces to Syria, which reportedly it is doing.
How in pardon me. How do you see right now, Larry, the situation in the United States? Do you think that the Trump administration or the people who are going to work with Trump are happy with the situation that the Biden administration trying to make for them?
No, I don't think they're. I don't think they're happy with it at all. But this was, recall Biden or Obama did the same thing to Trump when Trump was coming into office in 2017. He broke off. He suddenly broke off relations, or sent like 100 Russian diplomats out. Ordered them out of the United States. It was clearly a provocative move, just to poison the well with Russia. So I had heard a story that there had been some sort of tacit agreement or talks between Biden and Trump prior to the election, and maybe a sort of a quid pro quo. I'm beginning to doubt that now, or maybe whatever agreement there was, Biden has trashed it and going scorched earth. He can't pardon himself, and we may see that Trump will get his revenge. I doubt he will, but he could get his revenge by bringing Department of Justice down on Biden's head, just as it was done on Trump. Give him a taste of his own medicine. And in this case, Biden would be in actual real trouble, because his son, Hunter Biden, would have to testify against him or go to jail. Because dumb old dad gave Hunter a blanket immunity pardon. So once you've got that pardon, you can no longer, under the U.S. Constitution, claim the Fifth Amendment. You can't be compelled to testify against myself, because you no longer face any kind of legal jeopardy. You have to testify, or the court can find you in contempt and send you to jail. So, I don't know what. I don't think Biden, though, he's not calling these shots. What we're seeing are desperate plays by Blinken and Sullivan in particular. Lloyd Austin, I think, is maybe reluctantly going along with some of it, but as I noted just a little bit ago, with respect to that conversation between Russia's Gerasimov and DOD's Charlie Brown, I think that at least DOD's got the word. We're not going to mess around. We're not going to keep this poking the bear, because they're going to punch back and punch back hard. We don't want that to happen. We're trying to keep the nuclear genie in the bottle.
How about the situation between Israel and Lebanon right now? Do you think Israel would just see the conflict in Syria as an opportunity to attack Lebanon again?
Well, what do you mean again? They've continued to attack Lebanon. They haven't stopped.
I'm talking about invading on the ground, because
they can't invade. It's not a matter of they sit back, oh, well, we've got the capability, we're just going to hold off. They pulled out because they were getting their ass kicked. They were losing too many soldiers and materiel. They had to rest and refit. They may try to make another go at it. They may decide, okay, we're going to use this attack in Syria, because they are cooperating with that, participating in it, and hope at weakening Hezbollah to a point. They say, okay, now we got Hezbollah weakened. Now we can go finish them off. But, I keep making a point to some of these ardent Zionists. They don't like to hear it, but they keep touting about, oh, Israel's got such a great military. Really? Well, if they got such a great military, why are we here 14 months since the October 7th attack? And Israel, with the mightiest army in the Middle East, cannot defeat Hamas, who doesn't have an army. It has a guerrilla force. They don't have anything that you'd normally associate with an army, such as artillery, tanks, armored personnel carriers, combat aircraft, fixed wing, rotary wing aircraft, helicopters. advanced missile systems. They don't have any of that. And they're fighting in an area that Israel completely controls the perimeter. And yet Hamas is still alive and still fighting. What does that say about Israel's military capability? They're not what they are painted out to be. And that's because they're largely a reserve force, number one. And their own arrogance about their prowess, that, oh, we're so good, nobody can beat us. Yeah, so they've pulled out of southern Lebanon. They still got a presence there. In some areas, they're trying to still destroy some infrastructure. But they got hurt. That was one of the reasons they were seeking the ceasefire. And again, it goes back to, I think Yoav Gallant, who had been defense minister, tried to warn Netanyahu, but we don't want to do this. But they did it. Zero learning curve. Again, it's the arrogance factor.
In the eyes of Israelis right now, the situation in Syria would benefit them, in your opinion? Or even, let's go further.
Yes.
If we assume that they can overthrow Bashar al-Assad. Are they really believing that they can live with these people, these groups, ISIS-like type groups?
Well, remember what I said about the whack-a-mole strategy? That's Israel. They're looking right here, right in front of their face. They're only looking at the immediate. They're not thinking this through. I saw one of their shills the other day talking about, again, they're focused on, they fear Hezbollah and Hamas. Because Hezbollah and Hamas want the land. They have a legitimate claim to the land. The fact is, they represent Palestinians that have lived there. Their ancestors lived there for generations. The Jews who are there claiming, no, this is our ancient homeland. Man, you folks are living up in Ukraine and Poland. That's where your parents and grandparents came from. They didn't come from Palestine. But you've now moved in entirely on a claim based in your what you claim to be your holy scriptures, these sacred books that you wrote, your ancestors wrote, Jewish scholars wrote and that said, hey, I got this great idea that God said that we get this land. Well, what they're not thinking through is that HTS right now has not taken it as a mission to take back the land of the Muslims, as they'll see it, and to take the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But let's just say, if they take control and they get full control of Syria, it's going to be a problem both for Turkey, or Turkey, and for Israel. Because then, remember the Muslim Brothers, who were sort of the legacy, the founding legacy for Hamas. Hamas came out of that Sunni tradition. Now they moved away from the radical vision of the Muslim Brothers. And when the last Hamas charter actually, didn't talk about Jews as being the problem. It was the Zionists. They acknowledged that Jews actually, they recognized them as human beings. The Muslim Brothers on the extremist side don't. Remember, it was Muslim Brothers that killed Anwar Sadat. And the elements that comprised Al-Qaeda in the early days were a legacy of the extremist faction within the Muslim Brothers. So, at some point, if HTS actually gets control of Syria, then all of a sudden Israel, they're going to have a problem on their hands. And it'll be a whole new problem, and actually, quite a, more lethal than anything with the Bashar al-Assad and the Alawites have done. Under Bashar al-Assad, Christians were protected, even Jews were protected in Syria. The Sunni uprisings that have taken place throughout over history. And I mean, the most infamous one, I think, was in Homs, 40 years ago. Was it 40? It's listed in the last 50 years. I don't remember the precise date, but Hafez al-Assad, Bashir's father, killed about 25,000 people. And the survivors of that haven't forgotten. They hold a grudge. That's what I'm saying. This, you're not dealing with people who are pissed off about something that happened last week. They're holding memories that are years, hundreds of years old, and seeking revenge.
And for someone who follows the Iranian media, I don't believe, Larry, that Iran would let Bashar al-Assad be overthrown, because it's impossible for the mind of Iranian. If it takes them to fight directly with Turks and Israelis at the same time, they're not going to let Bashar al-Assad be overthrown.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so, and that's why I say I take the hysterical tone that is you find in a lot of the social media about how bad the situation is in Syria. I haven't detected what I'd call panic on the part of Iran. They're not acting in a very frantic manner, and we'll see. Iran's got other cards to play. I know that you've had Sayed Mohammed Marandi on your program, and he's been insistent that Iran's still going to retaliate for the last Israeli attack on Iran. Well, they haven't done it yet, and I take the view that if you're going to retaliate, you're going to do something. Don't talk about it. Do it. Unless your reason in talking about it is to give advance warning so that they can clear out civilians. Now that's where, Russia drew the difference that, hey, if we use this Oreshnik again, we're going to give you warning so you can clear your people out. And so because we don't want to cause needless civilian casualties. But apart from that, Iran, if Iran decides, okay, this thing with Israel, they're out of control, we got to cripple them. I do believe that Iran has it within its power to launch some strikes that had the potential to hit and destroy Unit 8200, hit and destroy Mossad headquarters, hit and destroy the Dimona nuclear reactor. You take out those three big targets, Israel, Israel be enraged, would try to respond, but it would severely impair Israel. It would be very damaging. I don't know if Iran's going to do that, but if Iran certainly has, they can activate the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and start moving them in, because people need to say, well, why are they doing that? This HTS views Iran as apostates and must be destroyed. Okay, that people need to understand that. And that's why Hezbollah was there fighting in Syria years ago against al-Nusra and against ISIS. And you'd think that because they want to fight al-Nusra and ISIS, that they'd be natural allies of the United States. But no. They're the worst terrorists in the world. That's why I say the United States policy on this is so hypocritical, and it's really brain dead, because it's not logical. The logic would dictate our number one priority is that we need to eradicate this Salafist Takfiri version of Sunni Islam. We need to eradicate that. It's as pernicious a theology as Nazism. Yeah, we have to be intolerant of that. We can't permit that. There's no freedom of expression for it. We got to stop it. but instead we're enabling it. And, you enable it, and then it comes around and bites you in the ass someday. U.S. never learns. Slow, flat learning curve over here, boys and girls.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
You have yourself a good weekend, and I guess we'll probably see you on Monday at some point.
See you, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Nima.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.